What is up, everybody? Welcome to the All-NBA Show, part of the All-City Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Mares, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Tim Legler, coming to us from an undisclosed location and hotel room. Legs, how you doing?
That's right. I'm very much like an intelligence agent, right? You don't want to disclose my location, Adam. I don't want people coming for me. So I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. I don't know. Like, I didn't know if another day removed from what happened in game two would kind of, I don't know, make you be more optimistic about the Mavs getting back in this series. I kind of feel exactly as I did yesterday. Maybe that'll change by the time we get to the game tomorrow night. But it just, there's just a lot for Dallas to improve upon. And so I guess, that's what we're waiting to see. And I guess that's what I've been thinking about ever since the show yesterday.
It's funny, over on one of my other shows, the DMVR Nuggets podcast, we call it hangover takes. It's this idea that you sleep on it, you wake up and you have a different perspective. Maybe your brain working in sleep mode will activate a new perspective on it. And oftentimes it's true. At least for me, I don't know how you feel, but oftentimes I watch a big game, I make my notes, what have you. The next morning, maybe I'll rewatch it, fresh eyes, and I'll feel differently. But what you're saying is, at this very moment, that has not been the case. And I agree with you, because I don't think the series has been very complex so far. So there's not a whole lot of angles yet, but maybe we'll get some in game three.
Yeah, this thing, I'm curious what guys on that team are thinking right now in Dallas. Some of the guys that haven't played well. And we know about Kyrie. We'll talk about a lot about him. And you kind of know how he probably feels. I mean, he's considers himself and should be considered one of the truly great offensive players in this league. And he just hasn't really had much of an impact in 2 games. So where he's at. But I just wonder, what's the feeling of the other guys on the team? What's the feeling of Luka? What's his leadership and vibe and energy like right now? Like on these off days as you're getting ready for a game 3. He's a very confident guy, so I'm sure he's expecting to play well and win. He probably has confidence that Kyrie will as well. Some of those other guys, I think that's what I'm wondering. Like, are they going to be significantly different looking when they get back to Dallas than they were in Boston? Because I just felt like they had too many guys that did not have a consistent impact in the 2 games. They had moments, PJ Washington had some moments. Gafford played well in the second half of game 2, but that's it. Other guys haven't really done much at all. So there's just so much there for all of these guys to be dealing with. It's not like everybody's playing well and then one key guy is not playing well, where all of the focus goes in that direction. Kyrie's getting the brunt of this, but he is nowhere near alone in this self-reflection right now period of time that guys are going through and figuring out how they can be better and will they be better. That's what this is. That's what we're all wondering. Game 3 is going to be a mystery. I think we're all wondering to see how different does Dallas look on both ends to get back in the series.
Hopefully a lot different. On today's show, we're going to be previewing that a little bit later on, talking about what we expect in game 3, looking at what Vegas thinks and kind of using that as a springboard to talk about the key battlegrounds. We're going to start with a mailbag, and not just any mailbag. We actually reached out to some of the people covering these 2 teams closely who know them better than anybody else. Some great reporters, analysts, bloggers, podcasters across the spectrum. We're going to answer their questions. They had some very good ones for us. And then later on in the show, we're going to talk about the Lakers coaching search, which is kind of a big story, honestly, across the NBA. The Dan Hurley piece and just this idea of what is the latest a team can add a coach. We'll get to all of that and more. But first, All NBA is sponsored by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. All right, Emma, let's go into the mailbag and we'll start in order here. We have our first question coming from friend of the show, Mavs Film Room, who you can follow on Twitter at Mavs Film Room. He has 2 questions. The first one, the series is still winnable for the Mavericks. By the way, I love it. Not a question, Legs, a statement. I like this one. The series is still winnable for the Mavericks. Tell me why that's the case. So this is the big question. Why is it still possible, even if you think odds are stacked against them?
Well, first and foremost, I think, it's very rare in all the years I've been doing this and trying to predict what's about to happen and give your analysis going into a series. Very rarely have I kind of written a team off completely when they haven't played a home game yet. That's just very unusual to do. For some reason, and maybe you could shed some light on this, we're obsessed in this industry that we're in, obsessed with being able to say it's over. We just love doing it. It's just so important for guys to say it's over. It's over. I hate the phrase it's over. If you want to ask a question and say, do you think the Mavericks can beat this team 4 out of 5 games now? Like, based on what you've seen, do you think the Mavericks can still win the series? And that's a legitimate question. Now let's talk about why or why not. But we're just so obsessed to get to the point where we can call a series over. And I just don't think we're there with this series. Let's first, they haven't played a home game yet. So let's just start with that, okay? Give them a chance to go hold home court. If they can win 2 games, you shrink this to a best of 3. Everybody's going to feel a lot different at that point with Mavericks if they do win 2, having momentum and how, depending on how they win them, if they come through late in tight games, and now you go to a game 5 and all that pressure would be on Boston in that situation because now you would potentially go on the road to get closed out in a game 6 if you don't hold home court. Like, there's so much can change. So yeah, that's why first. They haven't played at home yet. So let's start with that. Secondly, all the reasons I've said, there's so many aspects of their offense that have been below their best. And if you just are one of those people that want to chalk all of that up to the Boston Celtics, be my guest. I know better. It's not all about the Boston Celtics. And to me, the key to all of this is Dallas's offense. It's not their defense. There's only so much you're going to be able to do defensively. And to this point, the numbers Boston's put up have not been daunting. Okay. Right. Now, part of that's because they haven't shot well. I get it. But, then if we're going to give Boston all the credit for what they're doing to Dallas, then we're going to give Dallas's defense no credit to what they're doing to Boston. It doesn't work that way. So the bottom line is Boston hasn't gone for 125 in these 2 games. Right? They're barely getting over 100 points. So defensively, you're like, okay, there's certain personnel things that are going to be hard for us this entire series, but they're not shooting well, and maybe they won't shoot well from the 3 in this series. Where can we grab the most that's left that we haven't shown? It's on the other end. It's offensively. There are so many guys that have not played as well as they have to this point in the playoffs. So that's the other compelling reason why I say, yeah, they're still in it. And, saying win it, let's not get ahead of ourselves. How about let's win a game? Let's start there.
It's got to start there. With it. Yep.
Win a game. And I guarantee you, if Dallas wins the game, no matter how they win it, whether it's tight or they're impressive and they win by 15, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow night. If they win the game, the conversation is going to be so dramatically different on Thursday heading into a 4th game. It's only one game to start getting a more balanced conversation about what this series looks like. So that's my most compelling reason, man. They haven't played at home yet, and there's so many guys that have played below their best level offensively that I think that there's a lot of room there for those guys to grow and have an impact in the next 2 games. And that's why I say, yeah, let's see what happens by the time they're done playing in Dallas. This thing could be 2-2. Everybody's going to feel a lot different. There's going to be an awful lot of pressure on the Boston Celtics if that happens.
Some of my favorite series are series that start 2-0 and then get to 2-2, where you hold home court for the first 4 games. That usually is one of the best recipes for a great series because then it makes that game 5 so pivotal. Who has momentum? Momentum versus home court becomes a topic, and those oftentimes are the best. One of the things about the Mavs that is concerning is usually when we see that happen, 0-2, but you bounce back, there's some kind of momentum, like, okay, they figured it out in game 2. They made some kind of adjustment that you could foresee being a factor down the road. And I don't personally know if we've felt that yet for the Mavs. I don't know if I felt like, oh, there's something. They uncovered something right now. Do you feel that way?
Possibly, yeah. And I think that's going to be the big, talking points for both teams right now. This is what this stage is all about, right? This is where you make heroes out of people. You cement legacies. You make household names out of people. The way that you're talked about as a group, the relief that you feel. I think that's actually probably the best word a lot of times for these teams when they get it done and they get across that finish line, particularly when they have come close and haven't quite gotten there. I think that's what it's going to be, more of a sense of relief. Right now, yeah, I think that they're feeling like they're in a driver's seat right now, that they are operating closer to the way that they need to win this series. I think for Dallas right now, it's a little bit of questioning a lot of things as they got on that flight and headed back to Dallas. Like, that just didn't feel like anything that the last 6 weeks have felt like to them.
Right.
And that's where you go. And the best place to find it, Adam, the best place to find confidence, without question, is in the film room, because it's amazing what we might break down, what the common fan, the average fan might think that they're seeing and what it looks like to them. It's going to look different when you get all those guys in that film room and they're looking at it, and they're going to see so many opportunities that were there for them that had nothing to do with Boston, that had to do with them. Wrong cut, wrong timing on the cut, bad pass, bad placement where the pass went, missed a shot that's very makeable to you, didn't get a box out at an important time. Like, these are fixable things. It's not like they're going to be looking at what I'll go back to Denver game 2 against Minnesota all over again. Like, that film, that looked like that is an insurmountable defense that we're looking at, right? That's not what we're talking about here. And I think that's why they're going to feel better the more they've gotten to watch the film and look for opportunities that were there for them that they just didn't capitalize on, and they need to be better given the same opportunity in game 3.
It's funny you bring that series up, because if we rewind to that series after game 2, it was a 40-point lead at one point. I think they only end up winning by 26, the Timberwolves over Denver. That series felt over. The question was, is it a sweep or not? Because Denver, by the way, lost those 2 games at home and has to go on the road for game 3. And that series completely flipped. Denver wins the next 3 games. And then, of course, it gets flipped again in game 6 and game 7. But the point is, if you were to ask who had a better chance of winning game 3, Denver going to Minnesota after getting blown out in game 2 or Dallas now, it felt way worse for Denver. So this is the nature of the NBA. And I think even more true of today's NBA, where 3-point shot variance changes things, is that these things can flip, even if I personally don't feel like there was any reason to say it's about to flip. Boston has looked near perfect. They've looked phenomenal, and they deserve a ton of credit. A follow-up question from Mavs Film Room here, though. He asks, are there any lineup changes you would make for the Mavericks? This one's an interesting one, Legs. So is there a lineup change? We talked a little bit about players that would play, but would you go as far as to say you would change the starting lineup?
No, I don't think I'd do anything different with the starting lineup. I think that you might have to start considering someplace else to go with some of your bench minutes. Josh Green does not look like he's comfortable enough to have a big impact in this series offensively. And those are empty minutes. Right. I think, obviously, I've said it repeatedly about Kleber. He doesn't look like he has any confidence in his shooting. And I'm not saying that's not to be expected. The guy missed a lot of time, and he's been thrust back into this situation against a great team at the highest level of pressure. But he's not ready to contribute right now. That's 32 minutes that they got in the last game. 32 minutes with very little offensive contribution. And it's not like these are shut down defenders. So to justify their minutes, that's someplace I think that you got to look. Derek Lively, look, and Stephen A. this morning on First Take astutely brought it up too. To make sure we have empathy for him and what he's going through, losing his mom and all that. It's a component, man. I lost mine almost a year ago. It'll be coming up this summer, and I was a much older man when that happened. This is a young guy and his mom was his world, and so who knows what he's going through emotionally. So we have to have empathy, but at the same time, our job is to break down what's going on in the court and the production or lack thereof. He hasn't been close to as good as he was for them all year. I don't know if that's going to change. And I don't know what that means either. You don't have much of a choice. You got to play him. But does that mean you give more minutes to Gafford right now than you gave? Like, they basically are splitting minutes like last game, 22 and 20. Maybe it's tilted more in Gafford's favor right now because he was definitely more effective in the second half of game 2. Do you go to a Tim Hardaway Jr.? I would say at this point they're not going to, because they would have in game 2, in my opinion, based on what happened in game 1. They clearly don't think they can play him right now for whatever reason. I guess they think he's too big of a defensive liability, which is ironic to me because they've had issues defensively anyway. At least he's a threat to score, and he's a veteran player and he's been around. So, but I don't think they're going to him. Do you look at a guy like Jaden Hardy who got 2 minutes last game? The one thing I'll say about Jaden Hardy, I said it after game 1, I thought he was almost like he played 11 minutes and took 8 shots. He was almost too aggressive, but at the same time, at least he's confident. At least he's got confidence. So right now, do you go more there? Exum, does he get a couple more minutes? He knocked down the 1 3 that he got in 10 minutes. I don't know, But I don't think that Josh Green and Kleber are clearly better options than that. And that's I think something that Jayson Kidd needs to look at. They need shot making. They need offense. They need an injection of support around Luka right now. Or else this series isn't going to change. So talk about lineup changes. Those are the kind of things that I would be looking at.
What about this one, Legs? They have completely taken away the lob. I can't remember what the number was, 2 or 3 lobs total. Do you take away, I mean, when you talk about reducing Lively's minutes, perhaps, if you're not getting lobs, that's his number one, that's the number one thing he brings offensively. Is it possible you play a different style and just say, you know what, where they're taking away the lob, let's not put a lob threat out there. Let's play even smaller and spread it out.
Well, Adam, I think they already are. I went back and looked at a lot of the first 2 games yesterday and this morning. If you look at the number of times that they're getting a direct ball screen from Lively and Gafford, followed by a direct sprint to the front of the rim, it's nowhere near as often as they were getting throughout the regular season and during the playoffs. They're not even running that action. Those guys are, if they do set a screen, which a lot of times Luka's getting a screen from someone else. It's not the center. If they get a screen, he gets a screen from the center. It's like those guys are like tiptoeing down the lane. They're not because Luka or Kyrie are not coming off with that level of intent to turn the corner and get down the lane and like occupy. It's just everything about it. That part of their offense is like non-existent right now. Without that, it's a much harder thing to get the ball to the weak side corner for the threes, because the reason you get that shot is because you've thrown a couple of lobs to Gafford or Lively, and they were converting, I think, 6 of those or something a game. Okay. And now what happens? Now that weak side corner defender is going to come all the way into the lane to help chip on that jump so that those guys can't get a free run. They're going to pinch to the edge of the lane, and that's when Luka throws the ball to the corner. They beat you by a step, and that guy gets a corner 3. Well, if you don't have the lob threat, that defender doesn't have to leave that shooter. So those things are very, very connected. And I just don't think they're running like the same action to get that level of pressure at the rim right now. So that's something that they need to look at. It's a lot easier than just saying, well, do the things you used to do. Well, there's a reason they're not. It's because of the way Boston is defending them. And now you've got to figure out another way to generate threes, in my opinion, even more so than the lob threat.
Let's go to this next question here. It comes from John Corrales, my colleague at Locked On Celtics, a fantastic daily Boston Celtics podcast. He's been reporting live from the arena. He has a question here. What's your take on what Boston's defense has done to limit Derek Lively and what impact that has had on the Dallas offense, specifically getting Kyrie going? We talked about this a little bit yesterday about like what's the chicken and the egg between Kyrie struggles and Lively struggles. I do think they're connected, but here he's asking about it. Is there one that begets the other?
Well, I kind of alluded to it. Okay. So the lob threat means that the weak side defense is more engaged in the lane. If that means the direct kick out shot to the corner or the wing is there more often when there's a lob threat. The other thing that's available though, even if that's not, we're thinking about where the next pass goes. Typically it goes to the wing, to the opposite side, to Kyrie Irving. And because the defense has shifted to the lane, closer to the lane, Kyrie now catches the ball with more space and a closeout defender. And even if he doesn't just catch it and shoot it right away or catch it and blow by somebody, the fact that you're closing out against a guy that good, you're much more hesitant to come out and get up in his space immediately, which I feel like everything he's gotten in this series has been in space when he with no space when he caught the ball. And now it's just go create in these tight little windows, go create. When they are getting lob threats and Lively's more engaged and more active and more of a threat, now that defense shifts off of the opposite wing. That's where the ball goes to Kyrie. And now he's got a guy closing out at him that's a little bit more hesitant to just full bore run at him. And that gives him a little bit more cushion to operate on his first initial move. So all these things are connected. And I don't think that Lively or Gafford have put as much pressure or been as intent on like really sprinting. Particularly Lively. I saw some examples of him today where he's setting the screen and then he's just sort of muddling around as he goes down the lane. He's no intent and no purpose with that. When he's really good, he's literally dead sprinting to the rim. Whether you get it or not, you have to do it. And I don't think they're doing it nearly as often as they were.
How surprised would you be if there was 6, 7, 8 lobs in game 3 from Dallas after not having almost any in the first 2 games? How
I
surprised would
don't
that
think
be
they're
for you?
I don't think they're going to get that volume. And listen, I will say this: a lot of that's going to depend on assuming that you have a normal and healthy looking Kristaps Porzingis, because I think he's been a
Right.
problem for them. It's amazing as Gafford and Lively are like 6'11" and 7 foot. I think they're listed. They look like they're 6'5" next to Porzingis. It's incredible how much longer he looks, and that's been a problem. That's been a deterrent on not just the lob threat, but in general, like guys, him tracking guys to the rim the minutes he's on the court, it's a major factor. So to that extent, Boston's got really quick defensive players that are good at getting into the lane and then recovering out to the three. No, I would say that many would be surprising to me. If they got 3, 4, 5 of those over the course of 2 halves, no, that wouldn't be as shocking to me. It's got to be something. I don't want also to be so stuck on thinking they're going to win the game with lob dunks. Okay, that's 10 or 12 points a game at their
Right.
best. That's not the
Yeah.
answer here. But what we're saying is it does loosen up your
Right.
defense a little bit on the perimeter. That's all we're saying. And so Boston's fully aware of it, and they're intent on taking it away. If Dallas can get a couple there early in the first quarter, because they have better action getting into the lane off with the ball handler, and they can get a couple of those, now let's see what Boston's reaction to that is going to be, and does that lead to something better on the perimeter for other guys?
Let's go to the next question here, which comes from Dr. Justin Quinn of the Celtics Wire. He is at Justin Quinn. You see it right there up on the screen. He says, we often hear about adjustments from coaches in a post-game series without a clear idea of what that means among some fans. How would you describe how Mazzulla and Kidd shifted their approach to Game 2 after Boston's Game 1 blowout? And what do you expect to see their response for Game 3? We've talked a little bit about that first one, about some of the adjustments already, but first of all, let's just ask about the idea of adjustments. Michael Malone in this playoffs, and this was in the series they won. I know he had his long diatribe about how there's nothing more over discussed and exaggerated than adjustments in a playoff series. That for coaches, everybody talks about it as if it's like, oh my God, these crazy things. It's often 1 or 2 little things and everybody's got to play. So you kind of sounds like you agree with that, but what is the role of adjustments in a series and how do fans think about that correctly or incorrectly?
Biggest adjustments you're going to make, and I'm not saying there are none. Okay.
Right.
So there are definitely some. Some are matchup adjustments. Yep. Okay. And some of that is matchup adjustments with the intent and understanding there's going to be a screen, and now we get a switch that's more favorable to us than what we were doing before. Okay. So inversing the way guys were lined up initially sometimes, because then you'll get a better switch if they run the same action. That's an adjustment guys can make. Clearly, minutes and rotation is one of the biggest ones. Just kind of pushing that right button at the right time with the right guy in the game. And then making up your mind based on what you see. I don't think that's going to work tonight. I don't think that guy's got it. He doesn't look comfortable. He doesn't look confident. Bad matchup, whatever it may be. Now I'm going to maybe go in a different direction for a few minutes in the second half in that same substitution pattern. So that's another adjustment you can make. I think clearly some of the things you can do in terms of where guys are when you initiate action is an adjustment based on where you think the shot might come from on that set because of how they defended it in the previous game. You say, okay, that looks like that would have been an opportunity for player X if they had been in that spot instead of the guy we had there, because that's not his shot. So now you run the same action, anticipate the same result, but maybe you've got guys spaced out a little bit differently. So I agree with him. These aren't major, massive things. They're tweaks. They're tweaks. A lot of times it comes down to energy, effort, and shot making. And that's a lot of what you're asking out of your team to go into the next game. So I agree with him. I think we over criticize coaches for not making the proper adjustment. And when you look at the roster, if you're being realistic, there's so much you can do by the time you get to this point. And the number of playoff games you've played and the number of games you've played with this group in general, no one knows their players like the head coach. And so they're the ones that they have what they have. Let's see if we can fine tune the margins to make things a little bit better, to create some space. Hopefully a couple of these guys make some shots early because it could change their outlook on the rest of the night.
What about one thing we talked about going into Game 2 that I'm now even more curious going to Game 3? The Celtics are targeting Luka a lot. and making him guard and really making him guard in space. And one of the things we said was, do you just allow him to guard out there over and over again? Or do you try to just compromise your defense by getting him off ball? Well, you're going to trap early. We're going to release Luka. Do you think they try some of that? In part, I wonder, like, it's not just that Luka can't defend as well as some of the other perimeter defenders on Dallas's roster, but just the accumulation of wear and tear that happens to your best player when he's constantly guarding Tatum 30 feet from the basket.
Not just that. He's also, I think he looks very cognizant of not picking up fouls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Foul trouble for Luka Doncic is the death knell for this team. They can't survive that. And I think because there's been times he's gotten away with like the first bump defensively, but because he's been okay cutting off the initial, like the initial direction, he's been decent at getting squared up on those guys and like taking that first shot into the chest. It's the counter move off of that where Luka kind of gives up. And I've seen that repeatedly against Brown and Tatum. They'll go one direction or the other. He anticipates it. He cuts him off. He's very wide, so he'll like take that contact in his chest, very squared up, but then they'll spin out of that. Or they'll back up off of that and cross over and go a different direction. And that's when Luka kind of waves the white flag and just passes them on to somebody else. And that's what they've been getting themselves into trouble for, because I think if Luka, in his mind, okay, that was some contact there. If they make another move in that and there's more contact, that's going to be a foul. And it looks to me like that's where he backs off and lets guys go and makes it somebody else's problem. And there's no doubt Boston is taking advantage of that. There's not the secondary defensive effort. I can say the same thing about Kyrie. And other teams weren't challenging them to this extent to guard them. And that's why I think it's been a little bit more exposed. That second effort. Cut a guy off once is one thing. Watch Drew Holiday cut a guy off 3 different directions on the same possession. That's a whole nother level of defensive anticipation and want to. Luka and Kyrie, it's never been asked to do it to that extent. We've praised them that their defense is better. Their team defense is better. But this is different. This is get on that island and keep that guy in front of you. And that's not that's not their strength to do that for more than one move. Guys make a second move. Now it's on to somebody else. And I think the not wanting to foul them on that secondary bump plays into it for Luka.
And we talk about adjustments often in the lens of what's the team doing. They're changing their pick and roll covers. They're dropping. Sometimes it can be player adjustments, meaning we talked about this in the last show, but I think there was an emphasis by the coaching staff and by the players on the Boston Celtics of get to the rim. It's going to feel like you should take the mid-range because you're going to be open there, but don't. Just get to the rim because that's also going to be open. Just trust that if you keep going to the rim, they're going to crack. And I think there's one of these with Luka and with Kyrie to a lesser extent, but with Luka in particular of don't just give him one move. He shuts you down for one move. Give a second one. Give a third one. Give a fourth one. Because even if he stops you 4 times in a row in one possession, that's so hard to do, and you've done your job. And when you watch some of the lowlights, Luka Doncic's defensive lowlights have made the rounds on social media and different things, and it's real. He's having a hard time staying in front of Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum, but they're also giving him 15 seconds of isolation defense. You know, they're not giving him 3 seconds. Oh, it didn't work. Get the ball out of my hands. They're saying, nope, sit in your stance, guard for 15 seconds, and we're just going to keep attacking you until you foul or get blown by. And he has. I love this second question, this follow-up question from Justin Quinn, though, because it's so unique. If both teams could go back in time to the trade deadline and do something different, knowing that they'd end up in the final series versus the opponent, what might they have done in anticipation of a Celtics-Mavs finals? You don't make trades knowing who you're going to play in the finals. That's why this one's so fun. Right. And the Mavs trade clearly helped them to get here. But is there something they're missing that you think if you could rewind it, you could tell them, hey, just go add this, even if it's a veteran minimum type guy, go add this one thing?
I don't think so. I really don't. Look, they addressed 2 significant areas for them. They needed to get bigger, and they needed to be able to address the minutes that Lively wasn't on the court. Okay, because there was such a drop-off in what they looked like athletically and the way that they like to play and the lob threat that needed to be there for 40 minutes a night. They go out and they address that with Daniel Gafford. And the guy plays hard, and he competes, and he can defend the rim. He's basically like a clone of Lively in a lot of ways. So now it's like, man, this is great. We can go the whole game and have a guy like that on the court, which is critical for both ends of the floor for the way we want to play. And then the other thing they needed to do, they needed to upgrade the spot that Grant Williams was occupying, who wasn't making shots, who was a good team defender in Boston, was willing to put his body in there and draw charges and all that, had better defenders around him that kind of protected a little more individually when he wasn't guarding a bigger guy. When he had to guard perimeter players with quickness, he struggled with that. So when you now look at a Dallas team where the defensive infrastructure wasn't there around him, the defensive impact he was having wasn't that significant, and he wasn't making shots. So they went out and they added a guy that's a little bit quicker, better shooter, more consistent, fit better with what we want to do. So they addressed their need for a wing that could defend and shoot. Right. They got that in PJ Washington. So I don't know what more you could ask for. I mean, they picked up two guys that became starters for them on a team that went to the finals, and they picked these guys up in February. You don't see that very often, man. Where
almost never.
Make two additions to your starting lineup and then ride that all the way to the finals. That's very rare to pull that off. So to answer the question, I really don't know. I think it felt like the question was like leading us somewhere, maybe that they had in mind in asking the question, but I just don't know. What do you think? And certainly Boston, I don't know how you would say that about Boston. I mean, what more could they have added than what they added with Porzingis and Holiday before the year?
I think with Boston, you just look at how the playoffs have gone. What are they now? 14-2. It's hard to say, they should have done something different.
Yeah.
That's an incredible record, and they're dominating en route here. With Dallas, I think your point is right. You can only make so many moves. They actually are in the 98th percentile in terms of, trade deadline moves working out for them. Very few teams have had a trade deadline move work out better than it has for the Mavs. They do need more scoring. But you know what you can't get at the deadline for they made big moves, gave up some pieces. To get a 3-and-D player, a player that can shoot, but also is not a defensive liability, those are some of the most valuable commodities in sports. So they need one of those guys. I feel like this series, they're short one of those guys. But you know what? The Nuggets were short one of those guys. The the Wolves were short one of those guys. The Pacers were short one of those guys. That's why it's hard to come by. But I love the question. I just thought it was a great one. And I am curious to see what impact the success of the Mavs has next year at the trade deadline, if teams are more aggressive or, if they feel like in this NBA, because I was thinking about this, Legs. Usually there's 4 teams. The average NBA season looks like this. Let's go back to 2018. You have the Golden State Warriors, who are the clear favorites. LeBron has the Cavs, who are right there with them. Then you had the Houston Rockets, who were peaking in that season. And maybe you have one other team. And that's how it goes. You look at it and say, who could win the finals? Well, it's these 3 teams. There's 1 or 2 wild cards. Everybody else could be a good story, but they're not winning the title. I wonder if now in the NBA, there's more parity than ever. And I just wonder if the reason there's not midseason acquisitions, if there's only 3 teams that could win the title, you don't make those trades. But now, does the 9th, 10th best team in the league, which Dallas was at one point, they were the 9th or 10th best team, do they look at it and say, yeah, but it's wide open? And more teams are incentivized to make that move. I kind of think they do. I think we might see busier trade deadlines in the future.
I think there are more teams. I agree with you that have the finish line in sight. We're close. We're in this race. Whereas I think you're right. There's been a lot of years where it's like, it definitely clouds your thinking around making moves at that time of the year because you don't want to overreact to something that's unrealistic. And catching some of those top tier teams. There are more teams in the mix than there have been in the past. And actually, this has been an interesting postseason because of all of the really significant injuries that took other teams that we thought would be part of this mix out of it. Milwaukee, Philly, top of the list. Those were very significant issues that they were dealing with. And we thought that those were 2 teams that had a legitimate shot. Even New York, not having their best team and all that depth that we thought they would have. We didn't get that out of them. Kawhi Leonard doesn't play for the Clippers. There was a time when they looked like they were going to be a team to be dealt with shortly after they got Harden. They lost a few, and then they went on a long winning streak, and it looked like, wow, look at this team. And then you don't even get Kawhi Leonard when it matters most. So there's been significant injuries that have impacted all of this as well, or else there'd be even more teams that would have been in the mix. So I think your point is well taken.
All right, let's take our quick break here. On the other side, I want to get to two more mailbag questions. One from Nick Angstad, Locked On Mavs. One from Noah Dalzell on SB Nation Celtics blog. We'll get to both of those. Two very good questions. And then later on, we'll look at Game 3 and make our predictions for that one, which will take place, obviously, on Wednesday night. But first, the show is sponsored by DraftKings Sportsbook. We could have an NBA champion by the end of the weekend. My favorite bet, if you want to hop on and make the bet right now, Finals MVP. It's a tight one right now. You've got a lot of different players that Tatum plus 145, Jaylen Brown plus 150, basically tied for Finals MVP odds, which is kind of a fun subplot of this one. You have Luka still there at plus 600, which I find interesting, and Drew Holiday up next at plus 750. So I think that race might, if the Celtics win Game 3, that might be the most interesting race left in the playoffs. And right now, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, has you set up so you can make that bet if you feel very strongly about who it's going to be. With same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more, don't miss out as the NBA postseason winds down. And right now, if you are new to DraftKings, you can check out their new deal. New customers bet $5 and get $150 instantly in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. So you can hop on. I actually think Tatum might end up the Finals MVP. I think this might be a full circle sort of series for Tatum where he set the table early and then scores late in the series. So that would be my bet. But even if I'm wrong, if you're new, you can bet that and win $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code ALLNBA. That's code ALLNBA for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.co/bball for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources.
All right, back here, segment 2 of the All NBA show. If you're new to the show, welcome. Thanks for watching. We do this 4 times a week, 1 hour, nothing but hoops, man. There's no fluff in this show. We're not going off the rails. We're always sticking to hoops for an hour, 4 times a week. So hit that subscribe button if you're new to it. You can follow us also on your podcast app. It's always up there as soon as the show ends. Do us that favor. All right. Nick Angstad of Locked On Mavs, my colleague as well. He asked, what's been the difference for Kyrie in the games he struggled to score and the games he's getting 25 to 30 this playoffs? He has had a little bit of a hot or cold playoffs. Even if you go to previous rounds, when he was playing well, there were games where we were saying, wow, Kyrie's been so good, but he only had 11 points, 12 assists or whatever. So what is the difference between him scoring and not scoring?
Yeah, it's been interesting. He averaged like 26 or something like that in the Clipper series, like 27 in the Minnesota series, but 15 in the Oklahoma City series. Yeah. And again, you see what he's doing in this series. So you're right. I think he's had now 9 games, something like that, 9 games under 20 points. And a bunch of other really good games. So you're right. It's been kind of all over the place a little bit for Kyrie Irving. I think for me, when I notice when he's better, I feel like is he's got the ball earlier in the shot clock, earlier in the possession. Maybe even he's the one that brought it up. He gets into attack quicker before the defense has a chance to kind of react to the initial action. Now it gets swung to him, and they're just so set because they've gone over this, how they're going to close out on him, how they're going to defend him, what the next switch you're going to have to pull off, what's the next rotation against him. When he's got the ball initially, it's a little bit easier to create some chaos, and I think it escaped guys. And I think also just moving without the ball earlier in the clock where they come down, they run some action for him where he comes off a pin down or he sets a back screen, then gets a screen and comes off to the ball where you put him in something first before he catches it, but he's catching it early. In the first 8 seconds of the clock, he's got the ball where now that's like your primary option, and then he goes. He looks unsure right now. He looks unsure. Now, I will say this. I do think they're talking about 18 shots he had contested in game 2. Okay, that's a lot of shots to be contested, but let's go. And if I ran a rip of those shots right now, just one after another, we just watched the video of all 18, you're going to see an awful lot of makeable Kyrie Irving shots.
Man, I honestly think this is a big part of it. Does he need to change anything, or does he just need to make them?
He needs to make it, look, it's obviously between his ears right now a little bit. He's, that's like any player. I don't care who you are. You can't, the ball doesn't go in. It's a bad feeling. You start to not be so sure of yourself. And that's what he looks like right now. I think I pointed this out today too. I think there's been a handful of times he's made one move too many. Like he had the initial clearance to shoot, and then he went back into some other thing with his dribble, and now that defender recovered against him, and then the second opportunity wasn't as good. But a lot of these are makeable. By his standards, these are makeable shots. They're not easy shots. They're tougher shots, but they're makeable. He's had some mid-range, especially the mid-range pull-up stuff. These are very makeable shots for Kyrie Irving. So part of it is, yeah, man, he's just too good to keep missing some of these makeable shots. And if that happens in the beginning of the game, he could potentially unlock something and feel entirely different for the night. So I think his best games have been games in which he started quickly in the first 6 minutes. He had a few baskets. And I think that's going to be his intent, and probably the intent of the Mavericks is going to be to do that, to get him going, maybe more so than Luka trying to figure out things for himself early in the game. Let's see if Kyrie can get going a little bit. Luka knows he can get his whenever he wants. He needs to have some other guys feel in the flow and included in what they're doing. And right now, there hasn't been enough of it. Not just Kyrie, it's other guys too.
Our final question here on this media mailbag comes from a rising star on the Celtics beat, writing for SB Nation Celtics blog, Noah Dalzell. She asked, what has allowed Jaylen Brown to be so efficient this postseason? How much of his increased effectiveness can be attributed to the surrounding talent around him? And how much of it is just his own personal improvement? This is an interesting one because he's having such a great playoffs right now. Yep. What do you think?
I got a very easy, clear answer on this for me and all the film I've watched on Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown has reached a place now where he's always been pretty good. He's always had like a counter move. He's been pretty clever with his quick twitch dribble stuff. It's not like he's going to overplay with the ball, but he's going to be able to go back and forth quickly, change directions, and go. He's got a quick burst, quick acceleration. In the past, he wouldn't end up in a place on balance at the end of it, whether it was going to be at the rim or something in the middle area of the floor. It felt a little bit more rushed. There's a component of patience on your release and on your offensive, one-on-one play. There's a component of patience that's a big thing for guys to figure out. And it happens to great players at some point in their careers. That's what I'm seeing out of Jaylen Brown now. He is overwhelming you physically because he has the ability to do that with his strength, quickness, and verticality. He can do that against anybody. It's the way in which he is now finishing off those possessions, whether it's a 2-footed jump into someone's chest at the rim to get a better shot, or it's a strong jump stop into a lean back, step back jumper rather than something where he's drifting to the side and now the ball hits the front of the rim. He's just stronger through his offensive possessions than he was before. And I keep talking about being sure of yourself and confident and certain. Man, is he playing with a lot of certainty right now and a lot of confidence right now. It's all come together for him. I said the same thing about Jayson Tatum probably a year and a half ago when he didn't have counter moves with his dribble. He picked a direction and went. Yeah. Now he's got counter moves. You cut him off, he's got something else to go to get into something good for him. Now, he hasn't made shots in this series, but going back to a year and a half, 2 years, that's when he started to really elevate himself in terms of consciousness of where this guy ranks in the league, was when he started to add that, the counter, the handle being tighter, operate against a defender in a tight window and get something good for yourself. I thought he struggled with that when he first came into the league. He's infinitely better. And for Jaylen Brown, he's added a lot of that now too. So he looks so certain of what's in front of him and how he's going to attack it.
I love your first point too about the pacing or the timing of all of this stuff, because you see it with a young player. Like let's talk Scoot Henderson. He has some talent. He has some athleticism. He plays so fast and chaotic. He doesn't know the rhythm. Like everything has its own rhythm to it, fast, slow, mixing it up. And we know that about the extremes, the players that completely lack it, but it is a scale. And there are levels to that. And I love your point about Jaylen Brown, because I do think that's part of it. He's at the right speed almost every time now, offensively. And that's a big part of it. It's not always just fast, explosive, whatever. He's got the right rhythm for whatever is needed. It's an underrated trait for sure. All right, let's get into now this segment here, sponsored by DraftKings. Again, use that promo code AllNBA if you sign up and want to bet on it. But let's preview this game 3 and just talk about what we expect. First of all, legs. Everybody's saying the series is over. It's a sweep. The Mavs are favored on DraftKings, -2 coming into game 3. So that alone shows you home versus away. Things are different. They've been 6.5 and 7-point underdogs. They come in as a favorite. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm a little bit surprised that that would be the line going into the game, just based on what we've seen. But I guess maybe they also agree, like with some of the stuff that we've been talking about. It just feels like guys still have a lot of room to elevate their play offensively for the Mavericks, and not just one guy, several. And maybe that means they expect that to happen when they get home. You know one thing, if team's down 2-0 after losing 2 road games, if you're certain you're going to get a team's absolute best in terms of intent and energy and concentration and everything else, desperation. That's what Boston is going to get now for the first time. They're going to get true desperation on the part of the Dallas Mavericks. That does look different than what we saw in Boston. It just does. You can't fake that. You can't replicate that. You can't fabricate it. You either feel it or you don't. And you don't feel it down 1-0. You definitely feel it down 2-0. And so let's start with that. I expect it to be their most energized effort across the board, role players included. The one component we don't know is the ball going to go in a little bit more for Kyrie and for some of the PJ Washington, with a couple more threes. Is Kleber going to finally make a couple of shots? Will Lively and Gafford be able to score? Like, you don't know that until we see the game. But I think that, there's a reason that they're favored by 1.5 points, because there's just so much there we haven't seen that you're expecting will inject itself into the series at some point.
Yeah. This one, it's funny because the stakes are very obvious. I love the desperation point is right on because the stakes are very obvious. If you lose this one, if you're Dallas, it's over. Whether it's 4 or 5, it doesn't matter. It's over. No team has ever come back. So this game, for Boston, it's almost pressure-free, which can be a good thing, but it's also urgency-free to a certain extent. They won't have that same urgency. So I think that's part of it. The Kyrie Irving we talked about yesterday, 23.5 points, but Luka Doncic to me is almost more interesting, 32.5 points. Because if you ask me, like, what I actually think, if you told me Dallas won tonight, predict how it happened, I would say I actually think Luka just went off even more. 21 shots last game. I think he takes 30, and I think there's an opportunity for him to even crack, to break Boston even more than he already has. So which one of those lines do you feel is most likely to go over? Kyrie getting 24 points or Luka getting 33?
Man, I think they both go over, but I think more likely Kyrie.
Okay.
I just feel like, how could I not think that based on his track record and how good he can be when the situation requires it? And I believe that he's very conscientious in this situation. I think this is bothering him. He doesn't want to feel like, his co-star was left out there kind of fending for himself offensively because he's been so far below what he's capable of. I think that, he's going to come out fully intent on doing it. Now look, could go the opposite direction, man. He could come out and go 2 for 10 in the first half and who knows where he'll be mentally, but I think the aggressiveness will be there early. That's not a crazy number for Kyrie Irving. Now, if you said that number was like, 28.5, I go, man, you're telling me you think he's definitely going to have a 30-point game? Like that, I don't know. That's an awful lot considering how he's playing. You're talking about, get up to the low to mid-20s. Yeah, I feel confident that Kyrie can do that.
Right. Here's the thing I really think happens. We'll go to the other side now. Jayson Tatum, 25.5 points. Jaylen Brown, 21.5. I actually think we spend all this time, and again, I explained this right out the start. When a team loses, it's more interesting to talk about what they can adjust to win and get back in the series than just to keep saying, oh, this team's going to keep pounding them, even if that's the more likely scenario. But one thing I actually think, we spent all this time about positive regression for the Mavs. To me, Tatum really had a good settling game last game in terms of he read the court well, he set the table well, he did what he needed to do, but he missed all of his shots. Like, he missed shots that he can make. I think that either game 3 or game 4 is a game where he makes those shots and goes off. So to me, I like that bet. 25.5 for Jayson Tatum. I just think one of these next 2 games, he's going to have a really big game and open things up. So which one of those two do you like? 26 for Tatum or 22 for Brown?
I like the 22 for Brown. I just think Jaylen Brown's there's no questions in his mind about anything right now. And I think Jayson Tatum, I think he still carries around a little bit of the baggage of the previous finals. And now he's had 2 more finals games, hasn't shot well. And I think that that's something that does carry a weight with you until you have that moment you can break out of it. I'm not convinced it'll necessarily happen in this series. And one of the reasons I think, because it doesn't even necessarily have to happen for them to win. Like, and that's the first time I think we said that about a Jayson Tatum Boston team. Like, it was so much about him. And now it's not as much. And as a result, maybe it doesn't require him, depending how the defense is playing him at the start of the game, maybe it doesn't require him to take 23, 24 shots, right? Maybe he takes 14 shots and shoots better, but doesn't have a big scoring night because he doesn't need to because other guys are doing it. I just feel like Jaylen Brown right now, like there is nothing intercepting the muscle memory. Nothing is in the way.
That's a great way to put it. I love that.
He's feeling just completely in rhythm and relaxed, and that's why I think it's more likely to continue for Jaylen Brown. Wouldn't be surprised, obviously, if Tatum had a big game. Tatum had a 30-point game. I'm not going to be shocked by that whatsoever. He's that good.
Right.
I think that he gets asked about this stuff constantly. It's just constantly in the air for him, and I just think that makes it harder. Jaylen Brown's not dealing with those questions.
Yeah. I gave you the odds on Finals MVP. They're basically tied. I mean, it's just a fun conversation piece. But if you had to bet, where would you bet?
Oh my goodness! Well,
I
can go game by game, man. As we sit here right now through 2 games, it's Jaylen Brown.
Yeah,
Jaylen Brown, I think, gets the vote, and I think,
but just by a little bit. I think just
by a little bit. You know, I saw I don't know. You probably did. You mention? I think you did. Did you mention graphics on this show about the Finals MVP odds?
We don't think we have a graphic for it, but I mentioned him 145.
Oh, so you did mention, yeah, we did that on the graphic of the show I did this morning on TV, and I was surprised they still had Tatum as the favorite.
Yeah.
I was surprised by that, and it's
almost
not
had a triple-double legs last game.
Yeah, but it's not an indictment on him as much as it is the way Jaylen Brown is playing. That's I think more about what it is for me. So I tell you one thing, there's this much I do know, Adam. I've been around long enough to know if you're talking about multiple guys having a possibility to win it, you're in a really good place as a team. So true.
That's why I say with the Celtics, man, that became a narrative going into game 2. And you think, okay, how are they going to handle it? You don't think it's going to totally derail them, but they handled it so well. They played like a perfect team, and they clearly above that distraction or potential distraction. Let's move on now, though, real quickly to round out the show and just talk about some news and notes. And it was very publicized over the weekend. A curveball was thrown in the LA Lakers' coaching search. Dan Hurley entered the chat. I think sometime around Wednesday or Thursday, it was reported that, hey, they're now interested in getting him out there. He comes out, has a meeting. They talk about all this money being thrown out. And then on Monday, yesterday, right after our show yesterday, it was announced that he turned it down. So first of all, I just wonder how do you analyze this story and all the different layers to it about the Lakers looking for somebody, offering it to a college coach, which is very, we don't see that very often. It's such a risky move. What do you make of the whole arc of it, and then of course of him declining and going back to UConn?
Well, the arc of it, I'm going to go with my colleague Woj, and because I didn't hear Danny Hurley's name, nobody did, and then all of a sudden it popped up out of nowhere, and then Woj said no, they've actually been kind of talking to him for weeks and trying to get this to happen because there was a bunch of other names out there, and it actually for the last probably 4 days prior to Danny Hurley's name surfacing, it really started to seem like it was narrowing in on JJ Redick. His name was at the forefront of everything you read about it. And then Danny Hurley pops up. And I'm going, okay, I'll take Woj's word for it. He knows the Hurleys really, really well. He wrote a book on the family. So he knows these guys. They've been talking to him. Okay, so now here we go. Danny Hurley's injected into this. And I'm saying all along in my head, here's the thing. He is not wired to coach in the NBA right now. He is wired to do what he's doing right now. And by that, I mean full control. These guys are control freaks. Guys at that level have massive egos. And I'm not even saying that in a derogatory way. You don't accomplish everything he's done in his life without being in control because you know what? He trusts himself more than anybody else, and it's worked out pretty well for him. He's a 2-time national champion at UConn's got the best program in the country right now. So he trusts himself more than anybody. He wants to control. Who do I recruit? How do I coach them? How hard can I coach them? Those are all things absolutely in his power. And he's built this program with young men willing to come in there and run through walls for him that he can talk to a certain way and coach a certain way and make accountable a certain way. That's called being wired to do that. He's not wired to coach in the NBA right now. I'm not saying he never will, but I think right now that's not palatable to him. That's not rewarding to him. It's fulfilling to him, particularly when you're talking about a situation with Adam, when I don't think they can win in the next couple of years while LeBron's still playing. And then who knows what the Lakers look like after that. And that's what he's signing up for. And that is too uncertain for Danny Hurley, who wants to win. I said all along, If he takes an NBA job, whenever that happens, there's two types of teams that would work for him, I think. A young team that just drafted or is getting ready to draft the number one pick in the draft, a Victor Wembanyama team, right? Even a Paolo Banchero. Clearly, this is the guy, stud. We build around him, and we grow together, and I'm able to be impactful in who we draft to go alongside this star player, and it'll look like the kind of teams that I want to coach, right? That's one way. That might take a few years to be competitive. I think he'd be okay with that. The other way is, and this happens all the time in the NBA now, 50-win teams, they fire coaches. Give me a ready-made winner right now. I don't think that's the Lakers. And I think all of that added up to he wasn't feeling it because he's not there mentally to accept less control. It's a players league first. He's not going to be the face of the program like he is at UConn. The players are the face of those franchises. And I just think all of that at this stage of his life, he's not ready to sacrifice some of those things yet with the uncertainty of where this is even going. That's my take on it.
Is the Lakers aura gone? Because there's years past where you don't turn down the Lakers job. That job opens up and somebody offers it to you, you jump on it. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, it seems like a no-brainer. The money. So but is the aura a little gone for the Lakers?
You know what it is, Adam? It's still a prestigious job, but it's not a good job. And those two things aren't the same.
Good point.
All right. And so look, somebody's going to take that job because it might be the only shot they get to get a job. And it's the Lakers. So it's not like, come on, man, it's the Lakers. It's LA. It's like LeBron. Like there's a lot of good stuff there too, but it doesn't have the aura that it used to. And now it's an interesting situation for the Lakers because they targeted one guy. They went after him hard, aggressively. Some people think not enough financially. Maybe you offer him $100 million, make him the highest paid coach in the league. If you really want to make money a big part of this, they didn't get there. They're saying he's going to make almost as much as UConn now at UConn with the new deal he's going to get. So the money wasn't enough. But here's the thing. Here's the analogy I'll use. Imagine if someone goes and plans a wedding. They fill the church. They invite the people. They fill the church. They pick a specific day. Everybody comes to the church. All the guests are there for the bride and the groom, right? 50-50 down the middle. You get the band, the food, the lighting, the flowers. You get everything picked out. The only thing you haven't done is ask anybody to marry you yet. Okay, so now you go and you're at the church that day. Everybody's there. Half the people are guests. Half the people are guests of the person you proposed to, and they're sitting there and the door's open and here comes the bride, and it's not her. It's somebody else. And now, you know what's going to happen? Two things. Number one, the enthusiasm in the building isn't going to be as good. And secondly, the marriage isn't going to last.
There you go. That's exactly what's happening with the Lakers. Perfect metaphor. There we have it. Lastly, our last question. I got to ask you about your favorite basketball player in the world at the moment, Caitlin Clark. So she's been, having a very interesting season so far in the WNBA. Most popular, I think, women's basketball player in the world right now, but not on Team USA. A completely different, separate from the WNBA, different governing body. What do you make of that decision? I know you had some thoughts on it.
Yeah, I do, real quickly. But look, I look at it like this. I understand completely people that are saying, look, she didn't merit it. She didn't merit that being on this team. I get that. And for the players in the WNBA that are more accomplished, whether currently or some of these are more about their careers and the people that you put on this team. Okay. That there's a combination. There always is a combination of that. All right. I get it, man. It's an honor and you don't want to be slighted if you deserve it, but it's only every 4 years. And for some of these players, it's the first time and maybe only time they'll be on the team. It's important to them. So I get that part. And I do believe there are 12 players probably more deserving than Caitlin Clark is right now. That's one argument. I won't debate that. Here's what I will say. It absolutely would have been good for the WNBA to include her. First of all, what are you trying to do right now is drive your league to the forefront financially, the perks, player salaries, all these things, right? Network money, advertising money. Money drives growth of entities, any entity. Caitlin Clark was going to help you accomplish that by adding her to the team. So that's one thing. I think you are failing to take the business component of this and the overall betterment and health of the league into account by excluding her. That's one thing. The second part, and this is the part I brought up today, I haven't heard anybody else say this. Whether you believe it or not, Adam, and anybody out there that's listening to this believes it, that there's resentment and jealousy amongst the players of Caitlin Clark, because I personally think there is. Some people have like screaming. That's not the case. I'm just going by what I see, what I interpret, what I view. And I think even her own teammates in Indiana, there's some resentment there. I think it's a real thing. Whether you agree with it or not, I personally think it's there. And if you don't agree it's a real thing, you have to at least agree the narrative is there that it's a real thing. You could have, by adding her, done a lot in that regard by saying, look, these are the 10 and 11 top players in the league. We're adding Caitlin Clark. They are embracing it. They wanted her on the team.
Oh, I like this.
Okay, the goodwill component to help dispel a lot of the negativity that's being directed at this league right now with some of the stuff that's going on with Caitlin Clark since the day she got there. You could have done a lot to put that to bed, which is hurting right now overall views of the WNBA. And so, and she's got a massive following that's driving a lot of that. You could have really helped yourself if those top players said, you know what, come here, Caitlin, let's go. We were glad you're on, just like they did with Christian Laettner in 92. He didn't deserve to be on that team. They gave it to a college player. Let's go. We got you. Put your arm around her. Let's go do this together and show everybody we're not resentful of you whatsoever. And that would have been, I think, a very smart PR move for the WNBA to do that. Instead, they took the opposite route. And now, look, they're going to win a gold medal. They're not going to need her to do that. They're going to win the gold medal, but it's more about the perception and goodwill and what you could have done in terms of the long game. And that's this is a long game approach. This is very much a short game approach based on merit. And you can't argue about that. There's girls that deserve it more than she does, but you could have helped the league overall by adding her. That's my point.
It's maybe the most interesting moment in the WNBA's history, just in terms of it has an opportunity here for an enormous popularity. So I completely understand the value of it. And I understand the other perspective of it. One of these things is that the governing body is USA Basketball, separate from the WNBA. So, you know, each entity has to act in its own interest. But at the same time, I do think there is a broader umbrella above both of them, which is just the popularity of women's basketball. There's a real moment in time right now. And I do think, for whatever principle you hold, I do think it's important to understand, hey, you sometimes only get one shot to have a Jordan moment, to have a Magic and Bird moment, and you have to ride those moments to make your league sustainable and popular. So I see both sides of this one. I think it's tough. All right, let's get out of here now with some super chats from the chat. We always appreciate them. Psycho Blue says, Beatball Cthulhu, he's checking back in. And I enjoy this show's measured discussion about the sport. Sure beats complaining on national TV about getting unfollowed on X. Like I said, man, no frills. We get into it. I told him, I joked, Legs. I joked before we went live that we were going to go short today. And here we are 5 minutes long. It's because we talk hoop to get going.
No, man, one of the reasons you and I connected from the very beginning was it's obvious to anybody that's checking us out, man. We're passionate about what we're talking about. We don't agree on everything, but that doesn't mean you can't have very reasoned, measured, nuanced takes on stuff, man. And my whole thing is make people think about it in a different way than maybe they were before. And there's no reason that you can't do that on all topics, even if you don't agree. But the bottom line is, like you said, we're passionate about any topic that comes up because we love the game that much.
Yeah. All right, what's the next one? Carlos Hernandez says, should they put Luka in the post more since he gets so much attention in the paint?
I mean, he's in the post a lot. It's not necessarily traditionally in the post by going down to the block and throwing it in there. He ends up in the post though, whether it's to get a mid-range shot or whatever, he's getting down in there enough as it is. I think one thing somebody had mentioned today was, what if you just decided, hey man, you know what? We're not getting production out of Lively and Gafford, not enough to justify them being on the court as much. They're not really a better presence defensively with their rim protection. Maybe you go super small, Luka at center, and see what that does to Boston, particularly when Al Horford's on the court, and just see what that does. Inject an extra shooter on the court for spacing and see how they would defend Luka and Kyrie then. It's an interesting thing because I think at this point, if you're Jayson Kidd, you're going to be looking, man, quarter by quarter. How's it going? And what are some different things I could do and buttons I can push to generate my offense? But I think Luka's been down to the paint a lot. It's not necessarily traditional post-up, though.
Right. What's the next one here? Joshua Boraz says, do C's D qualify for Adams in a foxhole status? I think he's asking Celtics D.
Yeah, I'm going to need an interpreter for that question. I didn't understand that at all.
all of the guys seem very locked into their defensive assignments and capable of doing it. I mean, Boston has let their top level, and they've been the best team all year, and they're somehow at their top level right now. All year, he said he didn't know what the Celtics turned to when they were in a foxhole. So now I ask, I get it. This is, that question was more about their identity and where do you go?
I got you.
More of an offensive question than it is a defensive one. But I will answer it from the offense perspective. The most impressive thing to me about the Celtics, like I said earlier, is that they have been above the distractions that are not part of what makes you win basketball. Oh, so-and-so is getting all the shots. They called him the team's best player. They're so above it. And those are the things. And so to me, they've answered my biggest question about, but will they know what they are in those pressure moments? They seem to not care. They're a team, they're a unit, and they're going to win this thing as a team if they get 2 more.
Completely agree, man. They've been impressive. Their connectivity's been impressive. I give Mazzulla a lot of credit. I give Brad Stevens a lot of credit for what they did. Like, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to go add talent like Porzingis and Holiday, but you also have to have guys with personality types that fit into what you're doing and to mesh seamlessly into this situation, and they've done that. And I give Joe Mazzulla credit because I don't know, his approach, I think, is good for their team. The way he conducts himself, the way he communicates with them, what he speaks to directly when he's asked questions before games, after games. Very impressive, man. They're in the driver's seat. They're in total control. Let's see if Dallas has a response to make this interesting. We're going to find out tomorrow night.
What else we got here? 2 more. Turkish says, predicting a Tatum masterclass legs, 35-40. No, you were not.
I am not predicting that at all. And I think part of it's because if this was still Tatum and Brown primarily, and in like whatever role players around them, if that's what this was, and he had played the way he had to this point shooting, I might think, you know what? He's going to break out because he's got so many opportunities coming his way. They're just more balanced now. It doesn't have to be that. So if doesn't get it going early, he might not get it going on that given night as far as a big time scorer. But it's okay. They've got so far. They've had enough answers for that. So no, I'm not predicting he goes off. He could, but I'm not predicting that that's going to happen.
Yeah. And then the last one we have here, Vitamin Dave says, love the pod. Legs is the best in the game. There you go. A little love to get us out of the
I didn't know my wife was actually subscribing. That's a nice comment. Appreciate that.
Appreciate that, honey. Yeah.
Appreciate that, honey. I know that wasn't my son. He's only 2.5, so I know he didn't type that.
There you go. Cue that outro music, Emma. Everybody, thanks for hanging with us. Hour and 10-minute pod today. We get talking hoops. We can't stop. Legs, we're back on Thursday. Games tomorrow, so we'll be reacting live, man. Any final thoughts?
No, man. See you then. Looking forward to it. See if Dallas can make this interesting.
Everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like button on the way out. We'll see you Thursday.
Silly like the mayor.